Hey friends, my name is Julie and welcome back to my farm. So earlier today we had an incident on the farm where we lost one of our ewes, one of our sheep. And so I thought maybe today was a good day to discuss this sort of thing with you guys. Because I know many of you have your own farms or are aspiring to have your own farm one day and dreaming of raising livestock like we are. And whether you like it or not, this is part of it. Now, you've probably heard the expression where there's livestock, there's dead stock. And while I feel that's a very pessimistic view of raising animals, it's not wrong. Even under the very best circumstances where that animal just passes away of old age, the reality is that all of the animals that we raise on this farm have a much shorter lifespan than we do. And while it's difficult and uncomfortable to think about, I think it's important to think about ahead of time, process your thoughts, your emotions, so that when it does happen, you can handle it a little bit better. Now, on this farm, we are raising most of our animals for meat. And so obviously there's death involved in that. But that doesn't mean that we care about them any less. We also have many animals on this farm that we intend to keep for a very long time, mainly our breeding stock. And that allows us to form a pretty intimate relationship with those animals. And a lot of those we grow very attached to. And I know for most people that can be a really hard thing to understand. And I do plan to do a video covering that topic in the near future. But when we talk about animals, we're talking about sentient beings. And I know better than most that they have their own personalities, their own thoughts, their feelings, their desires, their needs. And as the livestock farmer, as the steward of my animals, it is my job to make sure that they live the happiest, healthiest life that I can possibly provide for them. And I take that responsibility very seriously. And when an animal is ill, I do absolutely everything I can to save them. And honestly, I have a really good track record. I can count far more victories than defeats in that category. But you don't win them all. So last night, I came out like normal to check the sheep before dark, make sure they had enough water, hay, that no babies had been born because we're coming up on our lambing season. And I noticed that one of my young ewes, named Diva, had isolated herself in the stall in our barn. That's never a good sign. So of course I went to check on her and I found that she had prolapsed. Now, I did a video last year all about prolapse and about the harness that we use. And so I've encountered this a few times. And in the past, I've always been able to repair it. So I felt pretty confident that I was going to be able to help her. So right away, I got Daryl, I got all my supplies. We went to work. I cleaned her up. I got her all put back into place. We put the harness on her. But something was different this time. She definitely had more bleeding than I normally see. And I was having a really hard time keeping things in place once I got them back in. And typically, the body knows what to do when you help push everything back where it goes. Things kind of fall into place, if that makes sense. And that wasn't happening this time. She just kept pushing as if she needed to urinate. Even when we got her to relax and stop pushing, I couldn't really get things to hold together very well. And while we were able to get the harness on her, and she actually ran out of the stall, went back to the flock, started eating, because of course they feel 100% better as soon as you get everything resolved. And at that point, things really looked okay, but I just knew that things felt different. It's hard to describe unless you've actually had your hand inside of a prolapse. And God, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But I had a feeling that that things weren't gonna go well this time. I also knew that keeping this ewe and breeding her was a risk to begin with. Now, she lambed unassisted last year, had a really big ram lamb, and by the time I found him the next morning, he was up running around, dry, nursing. She had really good milk production. She was an excellent mother, and so I thought she was gonna be okay. But the reason it was risky to breed her in the first place is because her mother prolapsed. It was actually the very first incident I've ever had with this flock, with any of my animals. It was terrifying. I had to learn in a hurry what to do for her. And that prolapse was by far the worst I've ever seen. It was my first I've ever experienced, but I was able to help her. I was able to doctor her back to health. I was able to help her have a successful, healthy lamb that year. And that lamb was Diva. And when you read about prolapse, you'll find probably a dozen reasons why it happens. And one of them is genetics, that there is a weakness in the muscles that hold that area together. And I really thought, since she successfully lambed this past year, that I didn't have to worry about that with her. And of course, I was wrong. And I bred her again, and she prolapsed, and I couldn't fix it. And we found her passed away this morning. She had 2 lambs inside of her, and they were quite premature. So it's not like she went into labor. Everything looked healthy and normal for the stage of pregnancy that she was in. So I really don't know what sparked this. One of the other reasons that prolapse happens is because they're too fat. She was one of my fittest ewes. She really didn't have a whole lot of fat on her. So, logically, I have to assume that it was a genetic component in this case. And maybe I shouldn't have put her at risk like that. But the alternative would have been to not keep her as part of my breeding flock, which would have meant she would have gone to the processor a year ago or more. So I am grateful that she was able to stick around for a couple years. I always referred to her as my miracle baby because I was able to work through that prolapse with her mom and successfully deliver her. And she was such a beautiful, really unique looking lamb. The day she was born, and I'll show you guys a picture of me holding her right after I delivered her. That was one of the happiest days I've ever experienced on the farm. I was so scared through that whole situation and felt completely out of depth. And I was able to deal with it. I was able to help her mom. I was able to have her born. And I really had high hopes for her to be a long-standing member of this flock. So when I found her with the prolapse last night, I was understandably devastated. But my mind always goes into action mode. What can I do? What can I do right now? How can I help her right now? And so that's what we did, but apparently it wasn't enough. And like I said, you don't win them all. And when I found her this morning, she had prolapsed completely. Without getting into too many of the gory details, there basically would have been no saving her if I had found her in that state alive. So I'm kind of glad that she had already passed away. We had a really cold night last night, so I assume between the blood loss and the cold, she probably passed away pretty quickly after it happened. But when we found her, she was fairly freshly dead. She wasn't bloated. She didn't smell bad. And I knew that she was perfectly healthy in every other way. I had not given her any kind of drugs, no pain meds or antibiotics or anything like that. I typically wait and assess whether they need any of that the next day. In my experience, repairing the prolapse itself has always kind of alleviated any of those concerns. But that meant that I knew that the meat was clean and free of any chemical adulteration and therefore safe to eat. And as you guys will see in a upcoming video, I've recently started cooking for my dogs again. And dogs are carnivores. They require a lot of high quality protein, meaning meat, in their diet. So while we have an abundance of meat in the freezer, a lot of that was taken to a USDA processing facility so that I can legally sell the meat, which means I've got quite a bit of money invested in it. And for the financial health and the future of the farm, I need to sell that meat. So I can't eat a ton of that. Typically, we'll eat the loose packages, the ugly packages, or the meat that we harvest ourselves here on the farm. So considering the conditions, that the meat was fresh, it was cold last night, there was absolutely nothing health-wise to worry about, I decided that the very best thing I could do was harvest the meat. And make sure that no part of her goes to waste. I save all the organs, I use all the bones in bone broth, and even the remnants of that will get fed to my pig. If conditions had been different, if it had been a hot day, if she had been bloated or stinky already, honestly, we probably would have dumped her in the back of our woods. And in that case, she wouldn't go to waste either. This area is full of wildlife that would benefit from a nutritious meal like this. From foxes and raccoons and skunks, to the earthworms and the bacteria in the soil. So I feel like whatever the situation, we make sure that they have a worthy end. Not an easy decision. Not what I wanted to do today or any day. Not that the act of butchering is that uncomfortable anymore. It's actually a skill that I'm happy to have, and that I'm grateful for the opportunity to practice and hone that skill once in a while. But you always wish that it is a planned, controlled situation where you can, humanely dispatch that animal and harvest the meat right away. But especially on a farm, you don't always get ideal. You don't always get what you want. And sometimes you just got to make the best of a bad situation. Hi, Ray Ray. This is Ray and Doris. They are my oldest girls now. They are still producing beautiful, healthy lambs, and I hope they do for many years to come. Well, Daryl's home with the hay, and we've got afternoon chores to do. Even on sad days like this, we have to carry on, and we have to care for all the other animals. So that's what we're gonna go do. So that's all I had for you guys today. Sorry if this video is a bit of a bummer, but I think it's an important topic to talk about, to think about, because I think a lot of people like to idealize farm life and just think about the romantic, beautiful aspects of it, which there are many, but death and sadness are also part of it. That's just life. So thanks for listening, guys. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
And the next morning, got 2 healthy lambs. 2 little girls. Good job, Dahlia. That's the circle of life.